Adelaide jazz musician Emil Rioch will be bringing his 12-piece band to the Gov on the 21st of December with a new show celebrating the music of jazz fusion duo the Brecker brothers. He joins us in the studio now to chat with us about the show. Good morning, Emil.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, thank you. For those not familiar with the jazz duo, could you give us a bit of an introduction to who the Brecker brothers are?
Sure. So the Brecker brothers are Mike and Randy Brecker. Randy is a trumpet player. Mike is a saxophone player. Both of them are multi-Grammy award-winning musicians, and you pretty much couldn't have the 70s and 80s pop and commercial scene in New York and LA without these two guys. So much like how David Letterman had the most dangerous band in the world, that was the name of his band, and the members of that band were all session guys. Mike and Randy were that, but for horns. And they were just, well, Randy is still with us, thankfully. Michael, unfortunately, passed away of cancer in 2007. But both of them have left this unbelievable legacy, probably the most formidable saxophone and trumpet legacy to date.
So clearly a huge influence, on the music scene in general. So what was it about them that inspired you to want to put together a show of their music?
Basically, I reckon I first heard these guys in, must be like 2012 when I was in year 10. And I was mind blown by this music. Didn't understand any of it. I just thought it sounded rad. And ever since then, I've thought how cool it would be to perform it. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized how much of an undertaking that would be, because their music is this strange mixture of jazz, but also rock and funk. So it's not just your traditional, 4-piece rhythm section with a couple of horns out the front. It's like 3 keyboards at any one time and 2 guitars and 2 bass, and it's kind of ridiculous. So what made me decide to do it is that I'd been talking to my old sax teacher, Dusty Cox, who teaches at the Elder Conservatorium here in Adelaide. And I said, hey, well, how cool would it be if we did this? And he said, yeah, man, that'd be great. I wish I had time to help you do it. And I went, all right, I take that as a challenge. So I made a post on Facebook and Instagram and all the socials saying, I'm going to do this show and you should come. It's going to be at the end of this year. And that post was from May 23, 2021. And here we are, a year and 1 3/4 years later, and it's only, how many days away is it now? I don't know how many days. It's 11 days away, thanks, Shannon. So that was it. I made a post and thought, if I don't make this post, I won't have a reason truly to do it, so I committed myself to it.
Well, like you say, this gig has been a long time coming, a long time in the making. What has been the process for you to get the show off the ground, particularly with a 12-piece lineup, that it's not an easy task at all?
Well, I started transcribing it. And by transcribing, for those who don't know what transcribing is, it's the literal act of listening to the recording and writing down what is being played into sheet music so that you can then play it back. So once I did a decent chunk of that, I started messaging some people who I'd kind of had in mind, who I thought would really bring the show to life. There were quite a lot of musicians that I could think of, but I was able to narrow it down to this select few names of ideal people. And thankfully, they were all keen. And through many, many hours of date comparison to work out who was available when, we were able to finally find a time to rehearse for the first time, and that was a year and a half ago as well. So it was just a matter of beginning the project, sending out some Facebook messages and hoping that I got some bites, and thankfully people came through, which was lovely. So
that process of transcribing feels like it could have been quite laborious.
Yep. Yes. I didn't keep track of how many hours I did, but it's one of those things that I really wish I had, just even if I timed like just one of the tracks from start to finish, how long it took me to write it down. I did do a bit of a guesstimate, like probably 6 months ago, and I reckon each track from top to bottom, from the first note input to when I exported it to PDF, was probably 8 hours at least.
Yeah.
And there are 16 charts in this show. Wow. So that doesn't include then going back and finding, proofreading. I decided to reformat my charts at one stage because I got tired of the font I'd used. So naturally, I went through all 325 pages and reformatted the whole thing. So it's been probably the most work I've ever done in my life. Including the entirety of my schooling.
Well, I was curious, on that note about the idea of, obviously it can be really sort of mind expanding to sort of gain a deeper understanding of really influential, musicians who have a strong place in music history. What did you learn through spending so long, looking at the details of the Brecker Brothers' music?
It's amazing how something that from the outset can seem kind of, I don't want to say basic because that sounds like I'm undermining it, but it's funky. And usually when something's funky, you just tap your foot and that's about as far as your analysis goes. Whereas as a jazz musician, generally speaking, we don't know how to switch off the analytical part of our brain. So we'll be listening to someone playing at a gig somewhere and thinking, oh, that sounds great. And then we'll notice that the piano player did a certain thing and then the sax player picked up on it. When you're listening to funk music, it's really just about groove and just feeling good and having fun. So when I started writing some of this stuff down and actually realizing how many layers of sound were happening that all gelled together like this amazing funky jigsaw puzzle, it blew my mind. I didn't know that it was possible to have such intricate inner parts that blend in so seamlessly to what the lead lines in the horns are doing. It's really remarkable.
We're speaking with Emil Rioch ahead of the Brecker Brothers show at the Gov, December 21st, just 11 days away. So what have been some of the most exciting parts for you pulling all this together?
Oh, well, other than the fact that it's been pretty wild to just see this PDF of music I've always wanted to play, incrementally expanding, one of the coolest things is that I realized that I did some research online and I couldn't see many instances of people doing tribute shows or really performing this music outside of Randy Brecker himself. So I sent him an email off of his website and just thought, well, maybe he'll see it. And if he does, great. And if he doesn't, then that's fine too, whatever. And amazingly, he saw it and replied to me and was kind enough to agree to do a Zoom call with me so I could show him my charts. So I actually got to tune in with Randy Brecker and show him my PDFs. Probably the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever done.
Did he like the font choice?
He loved the font choice. It was remarkable. I couldn't believe it. I was sitting in my music studio and had Zoom open and I'd sent him this invitation link thing that I'm sure everyone knows about. And it went ding dong, and there's Randy Brecker's face on my screen going, hey man. What? Freaking out. I'm like, keep it cool, play cool. Hi Randy, how you going? Trying to be normal. It was terrifying. So that would have to be the coolest thing. I could not believe that I met Randy Brecker.
And I was curious, you were speaking about sort of how, simple and fundamental, I guess, funky music is and groovy music can be. Has there been a particular joy in, sort of leaning into jazz fusion and sort of music that is made a bit more to dance to and party to compared to, maybe working more with traditional jazz music? Yeah,
absolutely. All of this music, all of it complements one another. It's not that one, of course, is better than another, and that's one of the beautiful things about jazz fusion is it is a combination of styles. It's not about, trying to do away with the traditions of swing and bebop. It's about taking those traditions and modernizing them, because you've got to think about the fact that in the 70s, when this music was being written, we had bands like the Rolling Stones who had come to fame, and we had the Beatles. James Brown was absolutely all over the news at that time. So Mike and Randy, when they weren't playing at jazz clubs, they were in the horn sections for these people, not for the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, but they certainly were in the horn section for Aerosmith. So you have all these incredible, super famous rock and glam rock bands who are just killing it at massive festivals. And the Brecker Brothers are there in the studio. And then that night, they're playing at the Blue Note, you know, playing probably a $50 gig. But that's what they did, and then they thought, what can we do to really express ourselves? And they took what they love, which is bebop and more traditional jazz, and combined it with this new modern, at the time it was the new hip sound. And the result is this wild, eclectic, funky thing. I don't know how to describe it, to be honest. Jazz fusion is kind of like saying, we're going to be playing some sport tonight. Oh, okay. What kind of sport? Come and find out, you know? It's hard to describe.
Well, wild, eclectic, funky thing can be the byline on all the posters around town.
Oh, yeah.
So what can audiences expect from the show?
I have picked out a selection of songs because the Brecker Brothers started as a song and dance band, and we will be playing a few songs off of their very first album, which is called The Brecker Brothers, self-titled. They have another album which is called Don't Stop the Music. We'll be playing a song or two from that. They have another album called Back to Back, which I'm currently wearing a T-shirt with the album cover on. And then what else are we doing? Oh, there's an album that they made called Détente. And détente is, if you look up the definition of that, is a state of uneasy. I think it also means that to be getting over something that you are uneasy about. And the reason that they called it that is because they'd just been swindled by their previous record company. If you listen to Don't Stop the Music, track one of the album is this really poxy pop song called Finger Lickin' Good, which the Brecker Brothers' mother actually wrote the lyrics to. And their record company said, if you don't put this track on the album and you don't make it track one, we will not release this album.
Wow.
Yeah, the Brecker Brothers were furious. And if you look at the album cover of Détente, the very next album, they are looking at the camera and they're clearly not happy. And it's their way of kind of clapping back at this record company. So yeah, we'll be playing music from that. We're also going to be doing a few selections of famous pop songs, which they appeared on either together or separately. So that'll be a bit of fun. If you like Shaka Khan, she's going to make an appearance. Not her, but her songs. Well, yeah, Shaka Khan will not be there, but her songs will.
Excellent. Well, Emil, thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us this morning and sharing the massive influence of the Brecker Brothers.
Of course, my pleasure.